Today we're going to go through some movements of the pelvis in all three planes, both in standing and then in supine, and then we'll come back up to stand to see how our pelvis is feeling. So to start, I'd like you to place your hands on the top of your pelvis, feet hip distance, maybe shoulder distance apart, bend in the knees, and we're going to roll our pelvis back and forward. Roll back, roll forward. So feeling how the top of the pelvis is rolling back, rolling forward. Allow your hands to move in the direction of the top of your pelvis, just to give it a little bit of encouragement. So a standing pelvic tilt, knees are bent, pelvis rolls forward, pelvis rolls back. Very good. Pause. You can leave your hands at the top sides of your pelvis. And from here, you're going to bend one knee, and on the straight leg, you're going to allow that pelvic half to move up towards your head. And then switch. So one pelvic half is moving up, while the other pelvic half is moving down. So we're referencing these movements as they are in relationship to your body. And this is important because when we lie down, up and down is no longer sky and floor, right? So here, one pelvic half is moving up towards my ribs, the other one's moving away. And then I switch, and I switch, and I switch. The hip points are staying relatively stable in relation to being forward or backward, right? One's moving down, the other's moving up. And then we'll pause. So now we're going to take one hip point. You can rest your fingertips on the hip points, and we're going to push that hip point forward. The knee will bend. The hip point that's gone back, the knee will straighten. And then we switch, and we switch. So one hip point is pressing towards the front of the body, and the other hip point is pulling towards the back of the body. Excellent. So one knee is bending, one knee is straightening, and you can allow your trunk to follow the pelvis, right? So that breastbone is turning from side to side because the pelvis is turning from side to side. That pelvis is turning towards the hip point that's moving back, right? And then we'll pause with that pelvis turned. So my right hip point is forward, my left hip point is back. I'm staying in that rotation, and I'm going to glide my pelvis diagonally to the front, diagonally to the back, diagonally front right, diagonally left back. So I stay in this rotation and glide my pelvis along a diagonal. 2 and 1. Now I'm going to turn the other way. So my left hip point comes forward, my right hip point moves back, and then I glide that pelvis. This glide is more of a translation. So I'm shifting my pelvis forward and left, back and right, forward and left, back and right, shifting in a range that feels comfortable and productive for my body. Then I'm going to come center, and I'm going to put all of these planes together in a figure 8. So I'm doing my best. I'm going to have my hands at my sides to draw this figure 8 with my pelvis. You could imagine that figure eight is being traced on the floor. Maybe it's coming from your tailbone. You could try to attach a long pencil to your tailbone and draw this figure eight on the floor, feeling how there's a front to back, an up and down, and a side to side motion happening in the pelvis. You're going to pause and switch the direction of your figure eight. Now, if you're like me, you picked the easier direction to start, and it's feeling a little bit or a lot harder to coordinate on side number 2. Your knees are responding to this figure eight motion, bending and straightening. And just seeing if you can make that figure eight as fluid and as controlled as possible. And then we'll pause. Great job. So we went through the 3 planes of motion in standing. We're going to take it down to the floor, lying on our backs, knees bent, feet flat. And we're going to repeat our triplanar motions, this time in supine hook lying. So this is our hook lying position with knees bent and feet flat. Now, if it's comfortable, you can place fingertips on hip points, along the sides of the hand, at the top crest of the pelvis, and thumbs towards the back. And you're going to roll the pelvis and the hands back. And you're going to roll the pelvis and the hands forward. Rolling back, rolling forward. Once you've given that tactile feedback a couple of times with the hands, feel free to rest them at your sides, but continue rolling the pelvis back, rolling the pelvis forward. So moving that pelvis in the sagittal plane, front to back, in our supine position. So you're imagining relative to your body how the pelvis is rolling back and rolling forward. You could picture your left and right pelvic halves like wheels on a vehicle and feel them roll back like you're backing into a parking spot and roll forward like you're pulling out. Backing in and pulling out. And really picture those 2 wheels, a left and a right, working together. And then we'll pause in between those 2 ranges. So now we're going to move that pelvis up and down. So let's start by taking one pelvic half and hiking that crest up towards the ribs. On the other side, it'll unhike. And then we'll switch. And we'll switch. So you're resting your hands, arms long at your sides, and you're hiking one pelvic half up while the other side unhikes. Remember that up is towards the head, down is towards the feet. So if you rested your fingertips on your hip points for a few repetitions, and you were to picture this as the horizon, the hip points aren't changing on the horizon, right? They're not moving forward or back. They're just moving up and down. Now we could use some imagery and picture a really long dinosaur tail or lizard tail. And we can imagine swishing that tail to one side and then swishing that tail to the other side. We're still performing the same exercise, But now we're adding some metaphor in enjoying this lizard tail that's swishing from side to side. And that tail swishing is acting on our pelvis or helping us move our pelvis up on one side, down on the other in the frontal plane. Bring that tail to center, balance off your hip height, both waistlines are long. And we go into our last plane of motion, our rotational plane or transverse plane. So what I'd like you to do is reach one hip point towards the front of the body and let the other hip point drop towards the back of the body. And then you're going to switch one hip point towards the front of the body, the other hip point towards the back of the body. And then you switch. So we're still cueing relative to the body. And what you can perhaps feel now, if you picture that horizon, you could maybe even picture like a sunset where you have the water line and the sunset above the water line. And one hip point drops into the water, the other hip point lifts up towards the sunset. So one hip point drops beneath the water, the other hip point lifts towards the sky. You're rolling on your sacrum. And then I want you to drop one hip point into the water, float the other one towards the sky, hold it there, and notice how the pelvis has rotated towards the hip point that's more to the back of the body. Go the other direction, drop one hip point into the water, other hip point towards the sky, and notice how that pelvis has rotated towards the hip point that's closer to the back of the body. And then continue dynamically rotating in the transverse plane. And maybe you can sort of say to yourself, rotating right, rotating left. So just tracking your pelvis in your mind's eye and labeling the direction that the pelvis is rotating towards. Keeping that low back relatively easy and rolling across your sacrum. And then we'll pause. And from here, could you put those moves together and start to trace a figure eight? So tracing that figure eight with your pelvis, trying to do it in a similar fashion that you did in standing. And maybe you'll feel that you can trace that figure eight across the back of the sacrum. So you'll feel that back of pelvis following the pattern of a figure eight on its side, an infinity symbol. Pause and switch the direction of your figure eight. Now it's quite common to feel differences side to side. So you can map this out. Maybe go a little bit more slowly. And then pause. Go back to your pelvic tilts, rocking hip points towards your ribs, away. Hip points towards ribs, away. Pelvis rolling back, pelvis rolling forwards. pelvis rolling back, pelvis rolling forwards. Last time. We're going to make our way back up to stand. Once you're in standing, little balance on one leg. You can use the wall or a piece of furniture to help you balance. Shaking out one leg. Maybe bringing it to the front and to the back. To the front and to the back. Planting that leg. Switching sides. Shaking that leg. Shake it to the front. Shake it to the back. Shake it to the front. Shake it to the back. And come down. Pause and notice if you perhaps feel a little more grounded, maybe even a little lighter through your thigh bones and your pelvis. A pelvis that can move in 3 planes is a happy pelvis. So good luck with your movement practice, and thank you.